So 2 years ago, I posted a video about how I switched from being a software engineer, individual contributor or IC, to an engineering manager or EM role. And yeah, now 2 years later, I'm making this video about how I switched back from being an engineering manager to an IC again. And I've been an IC for about 6 months now. So why did I switch? Well, changing to an EM role, there were certain things that I was interested in exploring and trying out. There were also responsibilities of being an engineering manager that in the end I found that I didn't really like. And there were parts about being an IC that I really missed. And so I think ultimately I decided to make the switch back because I think I would enjoy being an IC more, and an opportunity came up at my company, and so I was able to make that switch. So let's recap what an engineering manager is responsible for. Mainly, you're responsible for the output of your team. So it's no longer about your individual output, but how much your team is able to accomplish as a team of engineers. You're also responsible for how well your team collaborates within themselves and with other teams. That's part of getting things done and making sure that that is efficient. And kind of while all of that is happening, you want to make sure that your team individually, your team members are growing and they're engaged. And you also want to try to grow your team in scope, which then is kind of tied to growing your headcount and the number of people that you're managing. And eventually you kind of want to get to around like 6 to 8 engineers. And then if you want to expand organically, then you'll start managing managers, and those managers will have engineers. And that's kind of how you scale up the career ladder as a manager and go to like senior manager. Now, what was I looking forward to? I thought that kind of all of those ideas about being a manager and growing a team and making the team efficient and being a part of multiple people's output, I thought that was all like a really interesting just like thought exercise of like, what is it like to experience scaling your individual effectiveness as a manager that way through kind of other people. So I thought in general that was something that I didn't really have a good grasp of. And at the time too, when I started becoming a manager, there weren't that many other managers that I could talk to and like get an idea of what that would be like. And I think in general, it's also like hard to communicate what that's like to someone who just hasn't gone through it. So that was one thing. And then the other part of managing I was interested in is more on the individual development aspect of things. So like coaching and mentoring and helping people develop their careers. And then again, the timing worked out where when I was thinking about these things and interested in making the change, there was an opening for me to be able to do that organically. So that's kind of why I originally switched to being a manager. But I think what I ended up finding out after 2 years of being kind of like a tech lead manager into like an actual full-time manager is that the stuff I was interested in, mainly like the mentoring and career development part, was really only like 20% of the job, I would say. And the rest of the job was kind of more tedious than I was expecting, and I wasn't really super interested in those parts. So one of the big responsibilities I had at the time was this kind of like planning and process management. So, with an engineering org and like, quarterly roadmap planning, the company wants to be able to figure out what projects we can get done in the quarter that are the most important. And on the resourcing side, right, we want to figure out, hey, here's all these things we need to get done. Can we actually do them with the amount of people we have? And so you kind of need to know how many resources your team has, how quickly they can complete work, and then be able to use that for the planning, right? And then once projects are planned out, you want to like break down the work of those projects into smaller pieces so that your team can work on them every sprint. And then you want to be able to, track the progress of individual tasks and pieces of those projects, as well as, the velocity and how quickly you're completing things to see if you're on track with like what you were originally planned. So this is, at more established orgs and companies, the PM or like the TPM might get involved to help run these processes. But for my company at the time, we were pretty tight on resources. We don't have any TPMs right now even. So this kind of fell on me to work on tracking. And for me, like this is not something I'm super interested in. It's like this minute tracking that, I don't really subscribe to for myself. And so it was kind of hard for me to really get engaged and be interested in managing this process and like iterating on it. And then a lot of the rest of my work and time as a manager can kind of be grouped under this term that I heard called a shit umbrella, which is kind of the idea that you as a manager, a lot of random stuff is coming to your team, and it's your responsibility as a manager to kind of like shield your team from all that stuff and then kind of filter out what's actually important and then bubble those down to your team if they need it. Or otherwise you kind of just handle all those things and either like decline requests or kind of handle requests yourself. And a lot of those things ended up being like, organizing meetings and connecting people to other people to make sure that, they start talking, and, if they have considerations that they need to take into account for like cross-functional collaboration, or like, if my team is working on a component and then another team has a related component that's going to be affected by my team's work, they need to talk and figure out if there's any work in that connection that needs to be taken care of as part of the project, stuff like that. And it was really on me to just like deal with all these questions as they came up, and then, connect people to other people, and then make sure that, conversations are happening. And that was kind of like my role. And so it was a lot of like random stuff, a lot of just like meetings. And then to me, I didn't really have a sense of like tangible small wins, like week over week, that I felt like I was accomplishing. A lot of this was like, building connections and like starting conversations, and like the payoff for those things. I think both is like less tangible because it's just like, okay, collaboration is like running smoothly to whatever measure that is. So it's like less tangible, and then it's also like less concrete. Like you can tell like, hey, this specific thing is done. And so I think over time I ended up getting like pretty tired with like the work I was doing, because I think like at the end of the day, I'd be pretty emotionally drained from, having to make all these context switches and talk to all these people. And then I also felt like it was hard to get a sense of like I accomplished something that day. And I think over time that kind of just like wore on me, and I got a little tired with the role. And so like a lot of those two pieces of like the process management and like velocity tracking, and then like the umbrella, I think since that took up a lot of my time, and it was a lot of what I dealt with day to day, that I think was something that I was not super interested in doing in the long term, or I couldn't really see myself continue doing that in like the long term. So that's the Eng manager role. I'm probably thinking back to it, a lot more like negatively, and picking out like the things I didn't really like and focusing on those a lot as part of this video and as part of like reflecting and looking back. And I don't think things were like maybe as bad as I make it sound, but yeah, I do think that the role is not really for me, at least in that form that I was doing it in at the state of the company at that time. And so I wasn't like super happy. So that's kind of why I wanted to switch back, to be able to kind of like code again, having direct impact on the project I was working on, and then being able to like lead with my plays, as it were, to kind of like use a sports analogy of like lead by demonstrating my ability in getting things done and developing and designing things. That's kind of what I was missing and what I was really interested in doing again. And now it's been 6 months back in the IC role, and honestly, I am much happier. I get to definitely be more hands-on. I'm very much in the weeds of the projects that we're working on right now. I am doing some coding, but not that much coding. I'm mostly doing a lot of kind of technical design and high level, making sure that all the pieces are accounted for and there's someone working on it, and then those people are talking to each other where they need to talk to each other. There's still random stuff that comes up, but I can kind of direct those questions now to my manager if they're not directly applicable to like what I'm working on, or if they're not like a quick technical question I can answer. And then also there's just like less meetings in general, and all of the meetings that we do have that I try to attend are the ones that kind of are very action based and trying to like solve specific problems. So like, for any cross-functional like collaboration that needs to happen, or like integrations that we need to figure out the details of, those are kind of like the majority of the meetings that I'm in now. So essentially very problem focused instead of, general status focused or like team collaboration focused, which is what meetings as a manager kind of felt like. So yeah, that's everything on my switch back to being an IC. If you've had, a different experience as an engineering manager or as an IC, feel free to comment. I think my experience kind of as both an IC and an engineering manager are really dependent on the place that I've worked at. And I've been there for my entire career for like almost 7 years now. So, you know, the opportunities and the style and requirements of the job kind of are different depending on where you work. So I'd be interested in hearing about other people's experiences and have a bit more transparency on, you know, the different types of roles that you can have in this industry. Yeah, thanks friends. See you in the next one. Okay, here we go. Dude, this is easy. I just need to like read off a teleprompter, man. That's all I really need here is a teleprompter. Okay, so what do I want to say?